I'm Helen.
I'm Miss Sinclair.
And I'm Edison. Y'all better grab your extra large popcorn. We are in the thick of things with great films.
I am open and positive.
I don't like it.
Let's throw on these boxing gloves.
Let's do it.
Let's fucking do it.
Welcome to Talk Movie to Me, a weekly podcast where we do a deep dive on a new release that's just hit theaters or streaming. I'm Helen.
I'm Edison.
And I'm Miss Sinclair. It's Texas, 1979, and professional wrestler and promoter Fritz von Erich, known for his devastating finishing move, the Iron Claw, is set on making his sons champions. Kevin Von Erich is a Texas NWA heavyweight champion, but is looking to take his career to the next level with dreams of becoming the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. Fritz is confident that one of his sons can claim this coveted title, whether it be Kevin, Zac Efron, David, Harris Dickinson, Carrie, Jeremy Allen White, or Mike. Well, maybe not Mike.
No.
Played by Stanley Simons. But Fritz von Erich rules his family less with an iron claw and more with an iron fist. And the Von Erich drama, unfortunately, has a history of not always staying in the ring. The family has been subject to a so-called Von Erich curse. And when tragedy continues to strike, this narrative is fueled even further. The journey to greatness is a tough and challenging road. The boys encounter more than their fair share of trials and tribulations. Kevin has the body, the guts, and the drive, but David has the star power. Carrie has that golden boy glow, and Mike, well, he struggles to fit into the hyper-masculine world created by his father. But is there any validity to the Von Erich curse? Does tragedy strike because of some sort of unjust god, or are the fates cutting some golden thread? Were they victims of some prophecy, some tragic family dynasty? Directed by Sean Durkin, The Iron Claw asks the question, what's in a name?
Nice.
Okay, Edison, what are your first impressions of The Iron Claw?
Okay, so I went into this film knowing it was a wrestling movie, but not knowing anything about the story, not knowing anything about the Von Erichs. Even though I grew up obsessed with wrestling as a kid, but I was like a very young kid and didn't hear anything about them. They weren't wrestling really at that time. It was like I was the Hulk Hogan and Undertaker and Macho Man Randy Savage and Brutus the Barber Beefcake and Papa Shango years.
Wow.
So that will be important because it was vital to my experience of this film, and we'll get into that later. But I went in not knowing, and I love the way that the movie opens because I feel like it set the scene really well for the story. We see a flashback scene. There's this man in the wrestling ring, and he's got his hand held up in this like pose that's giving Lady Gaga Bad Romance. The crowd is going wild. And, of course, as a wrestling fan, and because the movie is called The Iron Claw, we know that this is his finishing move. And it's just so theatrical. I was, like, laughing out loud and felt, like, warm. And I also love that he was definitely, like, a villain in the ring. But then we immediately cut to him, like, leaving the arena. And the kids, his boys run up and they're like, hi, Dad. And he's like, hi. And then kisses his wife. And it's... So I, at this point... was like, oh, this is going to be this big, triumphant, feel-good, comical family drama movie about overcoming obstacles. I was really excited. Yeah. How about you, Helen?
Well, thank you for describing that because I did come in late again.
Oh, what is going on with you?
This is what's going on, is the last two movies have only been playing at Scotiabank. So that's far. I'm not used to going to that theater. Okay. And then I also go in the middle of the day and it's lunchtime. So I have to go to Subway first. I have to get a sandwich. That's why. Okay.
Yeah.
Also,
so it's the Scotiabank curse, apparently.
Yes.
It's not you.
It's not my fault.
It's the Scotiabank curse, right?
And also, listen, every time I go to Varsity, there's always at least 15 minutes of commercials and trailers. The movie never starts prior to 15 minutes. Scotiabank is a different story. They start earlier. So I walked in there the movie started at 1 o'clock. I walked in at 1:15, and he was already coming out and showing the family the new car. So no, it's not my fault.
Yeah, I will still note that you walked in at 1:15.
Yeah, exactly. So if there was 15 minutes of trailers and commercials, the movie should have been starting as soon as I walked in. That wasn't the case this week or last week. Anyways,
so it happened the last time, but you didn't take that into account for this time.
That's correct. Yes. Yeah. No, but the beginning is in black and white. We're seeing this car. We're seeing Maura Tierney, who I love. And I know that the movie's going to be tragic. I know a little bit about the true story. So I'm kind of just like buckling in, seeing what I'm going to be in for with this saga here. Sinclair, your first impression?
Well, I mean, my longtime partner is a big wrestling fan. So I had been told about the Von Erichs to a certain degree already. And then this movie has been the talk of the town in our lives since this movie was announced. This has been very highly anticipated by him. And I mean, also me as well, because we have actually been talking about this movie for a long time. But when this film starts in black and white, obviously that gives us a feeling that this is from the past. That's a standard way to show past or memory. But showing the Von Erich father, Fritz Von Erich, in black and white, it actually really made me think of Raging Bull. There was a lot of it that just kind of looked like Raging Bull, which I appreciated. I really liked the style of it. But really, it's hard to not have such an epic first impression of Zac Efron's body.
Oh my God, I know,
And
seriously.
We've seen stills of him from just working on this movie, but really it did not prepare me for actually seeing his body in this movie. It was kind of shocking.
Yeah,
with
it's really distracting, actually.
And the camera does focus so much on his body that I was like, wow, he is ripped.
Yeah.
But ripped like He-Man action figure.
Like chunky.
Yes. Just such a transformation.
Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll get into some storytelling, but just a little history on the Von Erichs. I'm hoping that if you're listening that you've seen the movie. If you don't want anything spoiled and you don't know anything about the Von Erichs, then this is your, well, I guess your chance was before we even started getting into storytelling. But yeah, don't listen if you don't want to know. But this is based off of a real wrestling family. The family's last name is actually Adkisson, but Von Erich is their professional wrestling name, and their father's original name was Jack Adkisson, who took on the professional name Von Erich because he actually played a Nazi heel, this Nazi villain, as his wrestling stage name, and they just kind of kept this name. By the time of his death, 5 of his 6 sons had died. 3 of which died by suicide. So that's kind of the tragedy of this family. Now, there was another Von Erich brother, Chris, who was not in this film. His character was actually combined with the character of Mike, and we can get more into that. But there was actually more brothers that died than this movie even lets us see.
Yeah.
And they did also have a brother who died as a child. So a lot of tragedy there. The Von Erichs, they were quite big in Texas. Fritz Von Erich ran a Texas regional promotion, the WCCW. So that's World Class Championship Wrestling. And the family faced so much tragedy that it's legend, this Von Erich curse. So that's a lot of history to have to summarize in one movie. So let's get into storytelling.
Well, just to touch off of what I had said in my opening, I do wish that I had have known some of that coming into this, just because I really set myself up for complete and utter devastation and shock, because it feels like 2 films kind of. It's like suddenly the tragedies start to unfold once David dies. And then it just is an unrelenting barrage of like tragedy, basically until the end. And you're just like, oh, fuck. And it sets you up to really love these guys and to be this, like, you really are rooting for the triumphant story. And there's just ain't none of that.
Yeah. Well, you did seem a bit shell-shocked when you came out of this. Like, you texted us after and it wasn't your usual energy, and I kind of got the impression that once that wore off, this film grew on you more once the
100%.
initial shock and wore off.
I can't wait to watch it again, actually. Now once the initial shock and like grief state maybe like wore off, then I started to appreciate the nuance of the film more. But at that time I was just like, whoa, this hour has just made me feel
it's a lot. It's a lot.
You just saw it, Helen.
Yeah, I saw it today. Going back to your first impression, Sinclair, about Zac Efron's body, I will say that like the first act of this movie feels like the gayest not gay movie that I maybe have ever seen. Like it really does. And like there was a part of me that was hoping that one of them would have a gay storyline. Like it felt really homoerotic.
Yeah, me too.
But just even in the way that it's filmed, I mean, obviously the director wants to showcase their bodies because that's part of wrestling, but it really kind of felt like
male gazy, which is hilarious. Yeah, totally. I agree with that completely. But you know what? So does wrestling.
Okay, but it really got me thinking about wrestling watching this movie, that like wrestling does feel very gay. And it feels like maybe it's a way for, I'm sure there are some gay wrestlers, but maybe a way for like straight men to like express something that otherwise would be considered unstraight or something, you know, like
it's an avenue that allows them to express flamboyance, and
with
extravagance,
costumes and characters,
totally,
and like
Ric Flair.
I mean, but also the sport itself is more intimate than other sports. Like, you know, but even a lot of like UFC and boxing and all of that, like these are close contact sports. So I think that combined with the flair of it might be contributing to that. But a lot of these sports are just, they're intimate sports. Like,
but it does make for a really interesting thing because wrestling is so, you know, it's brute, but it's also theater. And it's like, this film was just a really deep examination of manhood. And the more that I reflect on it, the more that I really appreciate it and actually cannot wait to see it again. But specifically this idea of manhood that's deeply American. It's like forceful and restrictive, but it's couched inside this ideology and language that seems on the surface to be aspirational. It's like respect, ambition, justice even. You're striving to like push for greatness, to be the best, but also like supporting one another's achievements, even if it means your loss, and taking accountability for your failures. And these qualities defined the sort of predominant model of masculinity for generations in a big way. But it's also a model that only has one ideal. And that's where the problem comes in. As we see, as we know, we've talked about toxic masculinity for years now. There's no room for balance, for nuance, or for the qualities that like connect us to our softer emotions, our fuller selves. It's unbending, so much so that when it's pushed to a certain point, it does what most unbending things do and fractures or shatters. And this film captures that whole exploration of it so well. It shows how this like poisoned ideology, it can become a curse that rots this family from the inside out.
You really see that with the character of Mike too.
Yes, completely.
You know, he is the artist of the family, the musical one, this more sensitive one. Even though the brothers all are quite sensitive, but Mike seems to be sensitive in terms of the arts and putting his passions towards that. And it would be really hard to be in a family that doesn't see value in that. And realistically, these are both difficult career paths But
Yeah.
more value is being put on, winning a belt than, Mike's music or his band. And
Because it's more masculine. It's more
considered
chest
more
thumpy, masculine. And I loved the part about how it's like it has to be suppressed, right? Like the father. I love when the mom says, like, your father played clarinet.
Yeah, and it's the clarinet.
Yes.
Too,
And it's
Could you imagine being serenaded by clarinet music?
Clarinet of all things.
I know, but it's like, but he had to just suppress that. It's like you have to just.
So I will say that I found this movie to be good, but not great. I didn't cry once in this movie. And
that's okay. I didn't cry either.
I know, but
I
it did not hit me. And I have theories as to, I think, why that is the case. One of which being, this is an insane story with a lot of plot points and a lot of tragedy, so much so that we're omitting an entire brother who committed suicide. I think it, for me, was a little too much to pack into one movie, that I felt a lacking in depth of exploring themes. I felt the exploration of toxic masculinity, but it didn't feel as deep as I would maybe want it to be. I had trouble connecting emotionally with this movie. I was able to acknowledge how tragic it was, but I didn't necessarily feel the tragedy.
Well, and we've also seen a very grittier version of the dark side of wrestling with addiction, with The Wrestler, the Mickey Rourke movie. This movie wasn't aiming to do that. I think that this film was definitely more about showing the brotherly love than about an in-depth look at, Carrie's addictions or more that led to the suicide. I think this wanted to focus more on the brotherly love aspect to combat the tragedy.
And
Right.
I think that was the deep exploration of this theme, because it's not just toxic masculinity. We see that. We see the father represent that and how he ruins his entire family because of it. It's so poison. But the decision to put so much focus on the camaraderie, on the brotherly love, on that thing that is actually what connects them, their empathy, their ability to have moments of vulnerability with one another. That's what saves them all at the end. I thought that actually showed the way out, the way to kind of break the shackles of this form of restrictive masculinity.
Yeah, I think that the choice to combine one of the brothers with another brother
I didn't actually know that was a thing.
Interesting, because I can see why they did it. Apparently Chris and Mike had a lot of similarities, and it does just start to feel one after another. And I don't think that this film is necessarily trying to get every single thing accurate to the true life story.
Right.
And you obviously have to take some sort of creative licensing here. Sean Durkin has discussed how hard it was to actually decide what to keep in and what to eliminate. I think that we're also used to now being able to have miniseries where things can just be expanded over 6 episodes, especially stories like this. But he did decide to take Chris out and combine him with Mike. Kevin Von Erich was supportive of this. Sean Durkin did write the script before getting this approval, though, and had the script done, and then Kevin Von Erich was informed about this. I mean, he's really lucky. I think it would be hard to really hard to omit a person. Little facts here and there, fine, small details, but an entire person.
One of the brothers
that died by suicide is that is a very tough choice. But I do get why they did it. The film does start to feel like one after another, because that's just what the story is. That's the truth of it.
Yeah.
The movie is depressing, don't get me wrong, but it did help balance it a bit. These creative choices plus the brotherly love, I think, for me, balanced it out.
I would have loved more brotherly love. I did find the first half of this movie, I enjoyed that and I was on board with that, and then it I don't know how you tackle this much tragedy in one movie without it just being like one after the other, which is what it was at the end. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot to have to put into a film. I don't, envy that task of writing this script and telling this family story, because it's overwhelming. I think it was lacking for me in somewhere for it to let me in. I just didn't feel like I could get let into this story. And there was aspects of it that felt a bit heavy-handed to me. At the end when Kevin finally cries and says men aren't supposed to cry, I was just kind of like, okay, yes.
See, that we'll get into the ending, because that normally wouldn't work for me in a film, but I actually feel like it worked for me in this film. I think because Zac Efron's character has been so stoic in so much of this and not as open with his feelings, and they've really had that like stiff upper lip attitude death after death. I think the film like needed that moment. So I
just think it could have been better acted and better written, to be honest. Like
and that's fair. This is the thing. These are the types of things that are subjective in a film, right?
Yeah.
It moved me. I was like weeping. That we're talking about the scene where he's sitting with his boys.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because it's like, this is the moment. This character has been trying to process, but he has never ever been given the tools to process. Lily James's character is trying her best, and she represents this lightness and this warmth and love and freedom from that masculine kind of ideal, right? And I think that why he's escaped, why he was able to, is because he like leaned into that and didn't try and dominate. And that was the like moment with his little kids where he was like, oh, they gave him permission. I get it. I understand what you're saying, Helen. It's a little on the nose, but it did work for me too.
Yeah.
Well,
that's fine.
also
That's fine.
after every death, it was like, okay, well, who's going to fill the shoes now?
I know.
Who's going in the ring? Who's going in the ring? And it's like finally this moment at the end where, first of all, I didn't know that Kevin Von Erich was still alive. I was like, he's next.
Oh, no.
He's next. One thing my partner did not tell me was that Kevin Von Erich is still alive. So I was like, they all die. So I was pleasantly surprised at the end. I was like, oh my God, he lives.
Yeah.
He lives. He actually lives.
Broke the curse.
He gets through it. So I think that moment with his sons, and you do feel like, oh, he's going to treat his sons differently, and like you feel this moment of breaking the curse. So I think that's why I liked it. I could also see the dock scene. That wouldn't normally work for me necessarily either, and it kind of worked for me in this, and I don't think it would have. I don't think it would have normally, but I think because there is so much brotherly love in this, that anyone who's had a family member die, you imagine that, you want to know that they are somewhere.
Yeah.
You want to know you will see them again and that they are existing somewhere. And I think that's what makes this work.
I agree. And I think it's the catharsis of us having that moment for them as viewers, being like, oh, okay, like some kind of relief. But I also like that it was ambiguous enough, because it's bookended on both sides of that scene by Zac Efron's character like leaning over his brother's body. So it could also be interpreted as what Kevin is imagining his brother is going to right now, and that being his moment of kind of dealing with his grief or finding the light within it. So it's not so like, hey, they're all meeting in this special place definitively. It might just be what he's imagining.
Yeah.
Well, also, Kevin Von Erich, I felt for him this movie. He had the drive, he had the body, but he was not good on the mic. Like you feel him choking on the mic, and David stepping in, and it really is the sad story of like what makes a star. We'll get into performances a little bit more, but when Ric Flair comes into this movie, you feel the energy change. Like you feel a celebrity coming.
Right.
Yeah.
Like with that robe with the
you feel a star.
sleeves.
And I loved that because I could feel my energy pick up when Ric Flair comes on. And I almost wanted to start going, boo, boo. Like you feel it and you feel like, okay, that's a star.
But it is also a vital characteristic of the biggest wrestlers.
Yeah.
Hulk Hogan, these 24-inch pythons are coming after you. Can you dig it?
Yeah.
Like the Ultimate Warrior, they all had catchphrases. They all had their way. That was just this larger than life star. They were all good on the mic. They had to be. Yeah. Can you smell what the Rock is cooking? Like, it's all
so
that.
What do you do if you're an introverted wrestler?
You probably shouldn't be a wrestler.
You don't become a star.
Yeah, it's that sad story, on top of this.
Shall we get into performances? Speaking of performing. Okay, so the other barrier for me for this film was Zac Efron, unfortunately. I don't think he was bad, but he just was not great.
Really?
No, not for me. The whole time I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, this should be so moving for me. Why am I not engaging? And I think because he's the main character and we're sort of seeing everything through him, like I just could not connect. I really struggled to feel anything for him. I don't think he was doing a bad job, but I mean, to speak about Harris Dickinson for 1 second, the brief scene after he's puked in the toilet, that brief scene between the two of them, I was like, oh, Harris Dickinson. I'm into this character here. I feel clicked into this guy, and then he dies the next scene. But and Zach, I just couldn't. I don't know what it was. I couldn't get into it.
I did not feel the same way at all.
Yeah.
I don't know that I have ever cared about Zac Efron in any capacity.
I definitely haven't. No. Yeah.
But I really, really cared about him in this film.
Yeah.
And I think it's a totally different character. Like David, that's Harris Dickinson's, is like the character's different, and so he plays him different. He's such a free actor. He's in the moment, he goes for it, he's playful, and it's just a different dynamic energy. Whereas Zac Efron's character was way more muted, and he had to play it more like it was all his kind of inner world, and I felt all of it. I could see him just so scared to like break out of it, but also I don't know. It moved me.
Yeah, I do. I disagree, Helen. I think he was really good. And he's also playing a real person, too. So it's hard to add, I think, to somebody who exists. And also somebody who, a lot of his brothers were getting the attention over him as well. And it is a quieter role. But I think that the real acting is the body acting in this.
I will say that was impressive to me.
He has incredible body acting, and I don't just mean the transformation. I mean the way he uses his body with the camera. You feel him hit the ground. You feel his pain. You feel him take those hits. You feel him trying to support his brothers, even when it's him. He thinks it's him that should be doing some of these things. I don't think that the role required him to be big or emotive, or he is muted in a lot of ways, but I just think it makes sense in terms of the story.
See, for me, I'm not saying I needed him to be big. I needed there to be more emotion. For me, I didn't feel like there was anything underneath the muteness.
Right.
From an acting perspective, I wasn't seeing the struggle that was underneath being withheld. I didn't feel that. But I also don't think it was bad. It didn't get to that next level where I could connect with it for whatever reason. I don't know. Maybe I'm having a funky day. I don't know, but
But if I could also just swing back to Harris Dickinson for just a brief moment. I'm obsessed.
He's so beautiful.
I know.
It is actually unreal.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with him as an actor, with just, again, how authentic he is and believable in every moment all the time. But holy sweet thunder and Christ, he's so hot.
Yeah.
Don't you think? It's crazy.
Yeah. And there's something going on behind those eyes. Like when he talks, I know that there's something behind it, and it's not just on the surface. I don't know, but I was very engaged in his performance, and they kept dropping like flies, and then I was just left with Zach, and I was like, I know, but
You're your favorite one.
The other ones.
Yeah.
So Jeremy Allen White, who plays Carrie, now he's gotten a lot of hype. The Bear has been hugely hyped. I haven't actually seen it yet.
Oh my God, Edison. It's
I
so
know
good.
everyone has the exact same reaction. I've seen him in his Calvin Klein ads. I don't fancy him because he just has that very straight Sean Penn energy. But like, I do think that he's so, like, I get it. I'm watching it. I'm like, man is magnetic. Like on screen, he's absolutely going to be a massive, big film actor for sure.
I've been in love with Jeremy Allen White since Shameless. From ages and ages ago, I was in love with Lip, his character Philip, nicknamed Lip. So I've been in love with him for a while, okay? So everybody's like getting all obsessed with him now. I was there from the beginning.
Hey, the only person who's ever watched Shameless.
Yes.
No one ever saw that.
That's true. That was the
Just
only
you.
one.
I just feel bad because he's always in movies with fucked up families. Like, I just want some peace for Jeremy Allen White. You know, there's something about him that just for some reason works in really dysfunctional families.
That's
because
true.
he just like has this inside simmering intensity that lends itself well to that.
Yeah.
I actually think the best performance in this film, though, is Fritz von Erich.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, Holt McCallany. I mean, he's the patriarch. Like, he has complete control over this family to the point where the mother, Maura Tierney, I just wanted to wring her neck by the end of it. I was like, please do something. Like, please step in. And she was like, I'll let God handle it. Like, she had just like completely turned to religion, but like
the ultimate model of restrictive masculinity.
Yeah. But I mean, there really isn't a movie without Fritz von Erich.
I agree with that. I was not as compelled, and it may have been the writing that they gave him. He just seemed a little too one note for me.
He was like the narrator. He was all exposition. I felt like everything he said was just exposition. It was to move along the story, and that could be who that person was. Like, but I didn't feel super into his performance in particular.
I wasn't enthralled by him. I do love, like, Lily James. It's not like there was a whole ton for her to do in this, but she's always just like the most wonderful, welcome, like,
she's a sweetie
vision on the screen. Like, she brings so much light and warmth, and she represents hope.
She is necessary too to kind of show the impact of going after this dream has on the family. Like, she's that character.
Some of the other sons had wives and kids too, but
well, there's other tragedy too. Like, David had a daughter who died.
Yeah.
You know, like, there's just there's other tragedies too that are just not in this.
I know.
For sure. Mike was just perfect.
Yeah, he was sweet.
He was so good. You don't want him to get in the ring. And you think he isn't, and then he gets in the ring.
Yeah.
No.
That's not where he belonged.
No.
You're really rooting for him, and I'm not familiar with that actor at all, but he was really, really good.
Yeah.
I liked him a lot.
Awful hair in this movie, though, I must say.
Yeah.
Hairstyles.
Should we get into the technical then?
Yes.
I actually did. I mean, the hairstyles are bad, but I think those were the styles of the time.
That's just what it was, yeah.
Yeah, and I actually really quite enjoyed the styling, like the hairstyles and the costuming. I felt like it was really representative of the time, and it is, I guess, all of the 80s pretty much is what we're seeing in this movie. But the 80s is
bad hair.
Wow. Just really bad all around.
And especially as a wrestler, you know, you're going to be a little extra to have that big hair to stand out. I agree. The styling was fantastic. In general, the way that this film looked was I was really impressed. The wrestling sequences themselves, I was absolutely obsessed with. There were times when it was almost like percussive and melodic when they would be in the ring. Like that one bit when Zac Efron is like practicing his falls and he drops and he gets up and drops and gets up and drops. And it was like almost picked at this rhythm. And it was like, I just thought the way that all of the ring action was shot was so good in this.
The camera's relationship with the bodies in this film, incredible. And I think that people have a very like misguided idea of what wrestling is. And it's this idea, it's fake. The outcome is planned, but the wrestling isn't fake. These are stunts. People get really, really hurt. You know, these wrestlers, they become injured. They get addicted to drugs. They get concussed. Like, these are athletes. I think this movie does a really good job of actually showing how dangerous this is.
Yeah.
And you feel the bodies hit the mat. Like when Zac Efron hits the floor.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
people have died doing
Yeah.
this. People have career-ending injuries. And I really appreciated how this movie showed the severity of what these wrestlers go through. Because people, I feel like, oh, it's fake, which really downplays what these people do. You know?
I agree. Yeah. The severity of that and also just the physical prowess required to sustain it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, what was the last word on the Iron Claw for you, Helen?
So, last word for me, I think that this is an exceptional story. I just don't find it to be exceptional storytelling. That being said, it is good, and it really is an unbelievable story. And there was just something lacking for me in terms of having an emotional reaction to the film or an emotional connection, but it is definitely worth a watch, I think. Yeah. Edison?
For me, yeah, I really needed to sit with this film after watching it to reflect on it and come out of the sort of, yeah, as you said, kind of shell shock way when I first saw it. I'm absolutely going to watch it again. I do think it's a great story. I thought it was done in a really empathetic way, a way that invites us in. It ultimately shows the humanity of these brothers and allows us to feel the way that they connect with each other and with ourselves, and we want them to break free. And I appreciated the discourse around manhood.
Yeah.
How about you, Sinclair?
Yeah, I liked this. You know, as tragic as this story is, I had a great time watching it. To be honest, I know.
It is entertaining.
It's good. I recently watched Fighting with My Family with Florence Pugh. So even Florence Pugh has a wrestling movie out there. This one was way better than that one. For sure. Iron Claw is way better than that one. But I think that as a sport, this is kind of misunderstood. And I think that the work and the pain that goes into professional wrestling isn't known by everyone. And I think that movies like this, it gives us a good insight into this world. So I really liked this.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, this has been another episode of Talk Movie to Me. If you would like to get in touch with us, our email is talkmovietome@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram @talkmovietome. Rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And season 7 episodes are on YouTube @Talk Movie to Me Podcast. I'm Helen.
I'm Miss Sinclair.
And I'm Edison. Thanks.